Many of you know that our very good friend Robert Silver died last Wednesday at the end of a very long, rich life full of love and laughter and learning. Bob was a mensch, which is a Yiddish term that means a wonderful, sparkling human being, just a great guy. He faced adversaries like Parkinson's and cancer, not with a stiff upper lip or firm stoicism, but with bantering good humor and always a courageous playfulness. There was very little that could get him down. Bob enjoyed the finer things. He enjoyed sailing and travel and professional acclaim, but he always knew that friends and family were the real source of life's deepest satisfactions. It was a bravura performance. Bob was a gadfly. He was a conscience to the community. His tirades and tributes often appeared on the editorial pages of the Taos News, often prodding at sensitive issues that needed a good poke. He was an impeccable writer and wordsmith who knew the power of words to touch and transform. Bob was small in stature, but he was very large in intellect and generosity. He was endowed liberally with curiosity and caring for other people. He did not fear death. Rather, he feared not making the most of the cards that he'd been dealt. From a boyhood in the Bronx, he rose to the top of his field as a forensic psychologist and was blessed to spend 37 years with the girl of his dreams, Diane Frost. In typically unconventional style, Bob planned his own funeral and was present for it. A woke wake attended by over 80 of his comrades, nieces, nephews, kids, grandkids, a multitude of friends and family where he lives still in memory and affection. Bob was a sweetheart. He was one of a kind and indomitable personality. This stone is for Bob.
Do we have any other announcements concerning the church or the church family? Okay, now we'll continue with our joys and sorrows. It's a time when we recognize the joys that make our hearts sing and the sorrows that make our hearts sad. If you have a joy or sorrow and you want to share it with us, please come up and take a stone. Share your joy or sorrow, and then drop the stone in the beaker of water.
I would like to follow up on what Gary said about Bob. Now and then we are graced to have come into our life some person that makes us better. Somebody who says, how are you spending your money, your time, your energy? What are you giving to this community? He believed in following public officials very closely and telling them they need to be serving the public, not other things. He believed very strongly that talking to somebody that he disagreed with was useful because they might learn something. And I remember his amazing fortitude in dealing with the physical problems he had. On the golf course, you'd be playing with him, and all of a sudden he would do this for quite a while. And then the medicines would kick in, and he could golf again. I would see him on the dance floor with Diane, and they loved to dance, loved music. And as the years went by, the dance wasn't quite so complicated until finally, and they could still keep the beat, and they loved it. And he was somebody that said to you, I know you're a wonderful person. What can I learn from you? Bob made us all richer, made us all more responsible, and gave us love. Thank you, Bob.
When I moved here 5 years ago, Bob was one of the first people I met at the Northside Gym. We were in a class together, and one day he brought something as a gift for everybody in the class. It was a yellow rubber ducky. That rubber ducky still resides on the dashboard of my car to this day. Thank you.
Very simply, behind every good man, there is a good woman. Oh. Thank you, Diane.
I have a joy, and my joy is I've often bragged about my grandson, the one who stayed with us so he could snowboard from the time he was 13. And then he gave up snowboarding when he got his first guitar. He graduated from high school and went straight to LA to make his fortune. And on his 19th birthday, he signed a contract with Atlantic Records. And he just made Rolling Stones playlist. So that's my joy.
May the joys and sorrows of each be the joys and sorrows of all. The opening words are from Starhawk. We're all longing to go home to a place that we've never been. A place half remembered and half envisioned we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere, a circle of hands will open to receive us, eyes will light up when we enter, voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends, someplace where we can be free. Mimi will light our chalice now, if you'll join me in our words of affirmation. We kindle this flame to illuminate the world we seek in the search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. Autobiography, The Long Loneliness. Dorothy Day was the founder of the Catholic worker movement. She remembers, we were just sitting there talking when lines of people started to form saying, we need bread. And we couldn't say to them, go and be thou filled. There were 6 small loaves or a few fishes. We had to divide them. And there was always bread. And we were just sitting there talking, and people started moving in on us. Let those who can take it, take it. Some of them moved out, and then that made room for more, and somehow the walls expanded. And we were just sitting there talking, and someone said, let's all go live on a farm. It was as casual as that, I think. It just came about. It happened. And I found myself a barren woman, a joyful mother of children. It's not always easy to be joyful, to remember the duty of delight. The most significant thing about the Catholic worker is poverty, some people say, and others say the most significant thing is community, but the final word is love. We cannot love God unless we love each other, and to love, we have to know each other. And we know each other in the breaking of bread, and we're not alone anymore. Heaven is a banquet. And life is a banquet too, even with a crust where there's companionship. We have all known the long loneliness. And we've learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community, and it all happened while we were sitting there talking. And it's still going on. I invite you to take your gray hymnal. We're going to do a reading together. Number 468. Let's have those on this side of the room begin, and those on this side can do the response. We need one another when we mourn and when we comfort.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we're in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of fatigue, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die, and we have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
Just take a moment to breathe, to be present. To all the stories, all the lives, all the souls gathered in this room. The simplest blessing is to be here now, to be here now together. Amen. Eleanor Rigby, wearing a face she keeps in a jar by the door. Father Mackenzie, writing the words to a sermon no one will hear. All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? turns out that Eleanor Rigby was probably a real person. There is a marker for her in the graveyard at St. Peter's Parish in Liverpool. And nearby there's another tombstone that has the name Mackenzie on it. And John Lennon happened to attend St. Peter's Sunday School as a boy. And it was there that he first met Paul McCartney at a church social. But apparently they thought they were just making that name up because it wasn't about a real person. It was about all of us. It was about anybody and everybody. In Britain now, physicians in the National Health Service say that 1/5 of all the people who come in to be seen are visiting primarily due to loneliness. And that's the picture we find here in the United States, where among adults, about 20% of us say they feel lonely, not just occasionally or sometimes, but often or almost all the time. And even more than that, say that there's not a single person in their life. They don't have one person they can trust to talk to about deep personal issues. There's no one to listen or understand or empathize. So we're probably talking about 50 or 60 million people in this country. If you're feeling alone, you're not alone. I'm nobody, wrote the poet Emily Dickinson. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell anyone. They'd advertise, you know. Apparently, Emily did have close friends, despite being a recluse who hardly ever left the town of Amherst. Often she simply preferred her own pen and poetry for company. But loneliness is something different from solitude. Artists and poets and mystics can thrive on solitude. Their inspiration, their creativity, their strength is coming from either within or above. Solitude can mean reading a book with very lively companions. Think of Bilbo Baggins or Harry Potter. Or solitude can mean spending time in nature, where there's seldom a dull moment, if you don't mind looking at how the clouds change in the sky, or noticing how the wind moves through the branches of the trees, which I do. Solitude is vital, and unless we feel comfortable with ourselves and in our own skins, then we can hardly be fit companions for other people. But loneliness is something different from solitude. It comes not so much from being cast onto one's own thoughts and resources, but rather from lacking any real contact beyond that. It's the feeling of being left out and unnoticed and overlooked. And loneliness usually brings with it some sense of failure or shame or stigma. Not just being single, but singled out from the rest as a kind of nerd or a misfit. And that creates this reservoir of self-doubt that renders ordinary social interactions even more difficult than necessary. The fear of rejection begins to build a wall, and every perceived slight or awkward encounter adds a brick to the wall, encouraging us to withdraw still further into this self-imposed cloister. And this is a very cold place to live. Last winter, our furnace went out in January. In fact, it went out this year too. Maybe we need a new furnace. But we lost all our heat in the coldest part of the year. And, we just called our neighbors down the road, and they had about 6 little space heaters. So we plugged those in, and we got through it. But it made me wonder, how hard would it be for me, or for any of us, to call up a neighbor and say, I need a little human warmth right now. I could use not a space heater, but maybe just some tea and sympathy, because my own fires are just burning a little low right now. But it's better to freeze to death than to admit that we can't do it all on our own. It's not good for man to be alone, the scriptures say, and isolation impacts our health in all sorts of ways that are the opposite of good. People who lack social connections are at 50% higher risk of premature death. The experience of loneliness is the medical equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes, almost a pack a day. It's bigger hazard than obesity, or excessive drinking, or lack of exercise. And this shouldn't be too surprising, because children, we know, need cuddling and holding and snuggling in order to thrive. The first 3 months of infancy have sometimes been called the 4th trimester, because babies need just as much warmth and comfort after they're born as before. And the little ones who lack that contact have lower levels of oxytocin, which is the love hormone that lets us learn how to trust and bond with other people. Physical contact, a touch, a caress, that lowers your heart rate, and it reduces the body's level of cortisol, which is the biomarker for stress. So human beings aren't just social animals, it would seem. Because of our long childhood, we're probably hyper-social creatures. We're more wired for intimacy, more wired for closeness, for interpersonal attachments, and we're more likely to suffer when those connections are missing. And it's a palpable suffering. I don't know who does these experiments, but slap someone across the face, that triggers the same little circuits in the brain that are triggered when someone feels shunned or ostracized. It hurts. Ouch. To be treated that way, to feel like you don't have any support, no chums. And while Tylenol can help a toothache, loneliness is much harder to cure, although many people do turn to opioids and other drugs to dull that pain. Over 20 years ago, the sociologist Robert Putnam wrote a bestseller titled Bowling Alone, where he documented all the societal costs of our disconnected culture. Falling rates of volunteerism, loss of civic engagement, drops in charitable giving, decline of organized religion, growth of gated communities. These were all symptoms of a population retreating from one another into strictly private pursuits, he said. So instead of movie theaters, we have home entertainment systems. Instead of bowling leagues, we have personal trainers. And Putnam identified television as the primary culprit behind this loss of connectedness. He noted that people who say that TV is their primary form of entertainment also tend to work less on community projects. They go to fewer dinner parties, spend less time visiting friends, entertain at home less often, picnic less, are less interested in politics, give blood less often, and express road rage more frequently than demographically matched people who differ only in saying that TV isn't their primary form of entertainment. But of course, Putnam was writing, over 20 years ago when the internet was still in its infancy, when cell phones had hardly been invented, before social media knew how to take the most disruptive and angry voices in the room and amplify them up to a roar. And it's only gotten worse since the pandemic. Social distancing was necessary, but it definitely came at a cost. Doctors have identified Zoom fatigue as a real ailment. That may be why you're here this morning. Talking heads in little boxes, wandering stares, listeners and audience that is switching on and off to mute or even disappearing from the screen altogether. Somehow that fails to trigger the same rush of serotonins and other feel-good biochemicals that we get from being together, from hugging, shaking hands, looking each other in the eye. One psychiatrist likens Zoom to junk food. He says that that's the equivalent. It's empty calories that may fill you up but can leave you feeling hollow later, and you can probably survive on potato chips and soda pop, but you're not going to be very healthy in the long run. And I wonder how much of the violence and insanity in our culture now is rooted in our isolation from one another. QAnon and conspiracy theories and paranoia. Back in my parish ministry in New England, I had a downtown urban congregation, and we would often have crazy people knocking on the door. There was one woman I was very concerned with who thought that her children had been possessed by demons. And there was one guy who was sure that God was talking to him on the radio, because religious delusions are very common psychotic features. And so I would try to steer these people toward professional help. But I would also say to them, why don't you find a congregation? Find a church where your visions and your revelations can be tempered or moderated by some tradition, some community that has a grounding in reality. Take these voices inside your head out into the sunshine, out into the public square. Take them into the temple, I'd say, because in seclusion, madness festers. So congregations are a lot like community mental health centers or free clinics where walk-ins are welcome, no appointments are necessary, open Sundays. It's found that people who attend religious services regularly do live longer, they're less depressed, they have better immune systems, according to the National Health and Social Life Survey, which is the most detailed study of sexual behavior in America ever undertaken. Those who worship weekly have better intercourse also, it's true that those who are involved in a church or a synagogue or mosque are less lonely. But actually, people don't go to church so much to lower their blood pressure or even to have better orgasms. More often, people come to a faith community because they want to give something back. And they want to feel like they're part of something larger than themselves. And maybe they want to be a force for justice and compassion in the world. And they want to leave the earth a little bit better for their passing here. And they want to add some value to the universe itself, even if it's only from their witness and their praise. And this is the beauty of it, that it's the helpers who get the help. It's the lovers who tend to see kindred spirits and soulmates everywhere. It's those who tap into their more generous impulses who end up getting enriched themselves. This healing power of congregations, it holds true even for Unitarian Universalists. Even though we have a much higher percentage of introverts than most other religions. Even though we are God's frozen people. Even though we are all rugged individualists and independent thinkers, even though we can be fairly standoffish and prickly and critical ourselves, even we religious liberals have this ability to form relationships that matter. We can support each other in times of need. We can affirm our co-humanity. We can overcome the estrangement of these hard times. Enjoy the pleasure of just being together. We just have to work at it a little harder than most. All the lonely people, where do they come from? Where do they all belong? I don't have the answers, but I think perhaps you do, good people of Taos. How can this congregation live out its covenant to engage one another with respect and compassion and generosity in all our endeavors? How can we enable people to feel safe within their own personal boundaries, while also taking that risk to have deeper, more lasting commitments? How can we encourage the shy ones and the reticent ones to get over that humiliation of admitting that loneliness is something we all experience from time to time. It's a human condition we all face. And how can we make it easier to ask for help, or even better yet, establish some kinds of norms and customs so that you don't even have to do that much asking to feel welcome and valued and included here. As I said, I don't have the answers, but I think that there are answers and that you have them. Not any one of you, not singly, but among you and between you, because truly we're better together.
This is the the time when we share in the responsibility of the church by donating to it. We'll now collect the morning collection. Would you now rise and join us in singing the hymn on page 34, So I May Speak with Greatest Honor.